The fire came on a Tuesday morning. Was 14 years old when the ships appeared in the sky above his city. He remembered standing at his bedroom window, watching the dark shapes block out the sun. His mother called his name from the kitchen. His father turned on the emergency broadcast. His little sister asked if school was canceled. 10 minutes later, the bombs began to fall. The eastern colonies burned for 3 days. They called it pacification. They said humans had become too numerous, too dangerous. They said it was necessary to maintain order in the sector. They used words like cleansing and population control as if they were talking about removing weeds from a garden. Survived because he was small. When his apartment building collapsed, he fell through a crack in the floor and landed in the basement. He lay there in the darkness, buried under broken concrete and twisted metal, listening to his city die. He heard screaming that slowly went quiet. He heard the heavy footsteps of soldiers walking through the ruins. He heard them laughing. He stayed hidden for 2 days. When he finally crawled out, everything he knew was gone. His parents were dead. His sister was dead. His school, his friends, his neighborhood, all gone. The had turned into a graveyard of ash and broken stone, walked through the ruins like a ghost, stepping over bodies that no longer looked like people. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He felt nothing at all, and that emptiness scared him more than the destruction around him. The refugee camps found him 3 weeks later. By then, he had learned to survive on whatever he could find in the ruins. He had learned to hide when he heard patrols. He had learned that the aliens liked to hunt survivors for sport, chasing them through the wreckage and taking bets on who would last longest. Was processed, numbered, and assigned to Camp 47B. The camp administrators looked at him with tired eyes. They had seen thousands of children like him, orphaned, traumatized, broken. They gave him food, a bed, and expected him to become another statistic, another conquered human waiting to die. They didn't see the fire in his eyes. 6 months after the burning, an old woman named found him. She ran a small soup kitchen in the camp, feeding refugees with whatever scraps they allowed. Most people thought she was just a kind old lady trying to help. They didn't know that 60 years ago, she had been one of Earth's greatest military strategists. They didn't know that she had fought in the First War and survived when almost everyone else died. Watched for weeks before approaching him. She noticed how he moved, quiet, careful, always aware of his surroundings. She noticed how he studied the guards who patrolled the camp, memorizing their patterns, noting their weaknesses. She noticed that while other children flinched away from the aliens, watched them with cold, calculating eyes. One night, she sat down next to him at the edge of the camp. "You want to kill them," she said. It wasn't a question. Looked at her for a long moment. "Yes." "Why?" "Because they killed my family. Because they killed everyone I loved. Because they think we're nothing but animals to be slaughtered." Nodded slowly. Many people feel that way. Most of them die within months, throwing themselves at the in fits of rage. Their anger makes them stupid. Their hatred makes them blind. They accomplish nothing except their own deaths. His expression didn't change. "Then teach me how to be different." That night took him into the abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city. They never went underground. Their bodies were too large for the narrow passages, and their sensors had trouble penetrating the thick layers of earth and metal. The tunnels had become home to the last remnants of Earth's resistance. There weren't many of them left. Maybe 50 people scattered across a dozen hidden bases. They had no ships, no heavy weapons, almost no resources. What they had was knowledge, decades of accumulated information about biology, psychology, and technology. Became's teacher. Every day she taught him something new. She taught him about anatomy, showing him diagrams of their bodies and explaining where they were strong and where they were weak. She taught him about their compound eyes that could see across multiple spectrums but had blind spots directly above their heads. She taught him about the soft tissue beneath their mandibles, the joints where their armor plates connected, the nerve clusters that ran along their spines. They have ruled this sector for 10,000 years, told him. In that time, they have conquered hundreds of species. They have become arrogant. They have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who is not afraid to die. She taught him how to fight, not the formal martial arts that humans had practiced before contact. Those were designed for human opponents and useless against aliens twice the size of men. Instead, she taught him techniques developed specifically for killing, how to move through their blind spots, how to strike at their weak points, how to use their size and strength against them. Learned quickly. He trained every day until his body ached and his hands bled. When he wasn't training, he was studying. He memorized patrol patterns, communication protocols, weapons systems. He learned their language, their customs, their military structure. He wanted to understand his enemy completely, to know them better than they knew themselves. 2 years passed, grew from a small, traumatized boy into something new. He was still quiet, still unremarkable in appearance. The soldiers who saw him in the camp still laughed at his soft features and thin frame. They had no idea that behind those dark eyes was a weapon being forged in hatred and discipline. On the day he died, she called to her bedside. The old woman was 93 years old and her body had finally given out. She could barely speak, but she pressed something into his hand, a small data chip. "The Citadel of," she whispered. "High Commander, he ordered the burning of the eastern colonies. This chip contains everything: blueprints, guard rotations, security codes. I spent 30 years gathering this information." Looked at the chip in his palm. It was so small, so insignificant. Yet it represented the combined intelligence work of an entire generation of resistance fighters. "Why me?" he asked. "Why not give this to the resistance leaders?" Smiled weakly. "Because they would waste it. They would plan and debate and wait for the perfect moment that never comes. You won't. You'll walk into that citadel alone and you'll do what needs to be done." "How do you know?" "Because I see myself in you, child. The same fire, the same patience, the same willingness to sacrifice everything for one purpose." She gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Promise me something." "Anything." "Don't let hate consume you. Use it as a tool, not a master. Kill because he deserves to die, not because it will make you feel better. There's a difference." Nodded slowly. "I understand." Closed her eyes. "Good. Now go. Make them remember that humanity doesn't surrender." She died an hour later and buried her in the tunnels beneath the city. He stood over her grave for a long time, saying nothing. Then he turned and walked away, the data chip clutched in his hand. He was 17 years old. He was alone, and he was ready to do the impossible. The Citadel of awaited. The Citadel of floated in the sky like a dark god, watching over the ruins of Seoul. Stood on a hilltop 20 kilometers away, looking at his target through a pair of stolen binoculars. The structure was massive, a mountain of black stone and alien metal suspended by anti-gravity pylons that hummed with power. Even from this distance, he could see patrol ships circling it like flies around a corpse. Weapon platforms bristled from every surface. Energy shields shimmered faintly in the morning light. No human had ever entered the Citadel and lived to tell about it. Many had tried. The Resistance had launched 3 major attacks in the past decade. Each one had failed completely. The last attempt, 5 years ago, had sent 200 of humanity's best fighters against the outer defenses. None of them survived past the first barrier. Lowered the binoculars and smiled. He wasn't going to attack the Citadel. He was going to walk into it. The Resistance headquarters was hidden in an old factory basement on the outskirts of the dead city. Made his way there through the ruins, moving carefully to avoid patrols. The aliens had set up checkpoints throughout the occupied zone, but they were looking for groups, for weapons, for obvious threats. A single teenager in dirty clothes didn't interest them. Was waiting for him when he arrived. She was 19 years old, the youngest Resistance leader in history. She had inherited the position after her predecessor was captured and publicly executed by the 3 months ago. The weight of command sat heavy on her shoulders and could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "You're really going through with this," she said. It wasn't a question. Nodded. "Tomorrow morning." "Alone?" "Yes." Shook her head slowly. "Trained you well, but this is suicide. The Citadel has 12,000 guards, energy shields, automated defense systems. You won't make it past the outer perimeter." "Maybe," agreed, "but I have something the previous attacks didn't have." "What?" "Patience and this." He held up the data chip had given him. 30 years of intelligence. Guard rotations, security blind spots, maintenance schedules, everything. The previous attacks failed because they tried to fight their way in. I'm not going to fight unless I have to. Took the chip and plugged it into a battered computer terminal. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the information. Maps, codes, patrol patterns, thousands of individual files carefully organized and cross-referenced. "This is incredible," she breathed. "How did?" She spent her entire life preparing for this moment. She just didn't live long enough to use it herself. Was quiet for a moment. "Let me send a team with you. Even with this information, you'll need backup. What happens when something goes wrong? What happens when a guard sees you or a sensor picks up your movement?" Shook his head. "More people means more variables, more chances for mistakes, more chances for someone to panic or make noise. I work better alone." "This isn't training anymore. This is the most heavily defended structure in the entire sector. You're talking about walking into the heart of the military command." "I know exactly what I'm talking about." His voice was calm, steady. "I've spent 3 years preparing for this. I know the Citadel better than some of the guards who work there. I know where every camera is pointed. I know when every patrol changes shift. I know which ventilation shafts are large enough for a human body and which ones lead directly to the commander's quarters." Stared at him for a long moment. She had known since he was a scared boy in the refugee camp, but sometimes he seemed like a stranger. There was something cold in him, something hard and sharp like a blade that had been forged in fire and folded 1,000 times. "What about after?" she asked quietly. "Assuming you somehow succeed, assuming you kill, how do you plan to get out?" Didn't answer immediately. They both knew what that silence meant. "You're not planning to escape," said. "This is a one-way mission. If I escape, good. If I don't, that's acceptable too. The only thing that matters is that dies. The High Commander who burned the eastern colonies needs to answer for what he did. Revenge won't bring your family back." "I know," his expression didn't change, "but it will send a message. They think we're broken. They think they've won. They need to learn that humanity doesn't forget, we don't forgive, and we don't stop fighting until there's nothing left of us." The night passed slowly. Made his final preparations, checking his equipment one last time. He carried no guns, no explosives, nothing that would trigger the Citadel's weapon scanners. Instead, he carried tools, a monomolecular wire thin enough to be invisible, ceramic blades that wouldn't show up on metal detectors, a small device that could disable electronic locks, climbing gear made of synthetic materials. His most important weapon was his mind. He had memorized every piece of information on his chip. He could navigate the Citadel blindfolded if he had to. When dawn began to break, prepared to leave, stopped him at the door. "Wait," she said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal pendant, a simple disc with a symbol carved into it, the Korean character for home. "This belonged to my mother," said, pressing it into his hand. "She died in the first wave of attacks when I was just a child. I've carried it ever since. I want you to have it." Looked at the pendant, then at why. "Because I need to believe that somewhere out there, someone is fighting for something more than survival. Someone is fighting for justice. Someone is going to make them pay for everything they've done to us." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "If you die in there, at least you won't die alone. Part of me will be with you. Part of all of us will be with you. Closed his fingers around the pendant. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something warm and human behind the cold determination. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'll try to bring it back." "You're going to die," said. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Smiled, a rare expression that softened his face and made him look his age for just a second. "Probably, but so will he." He turned and walked out into the morning mist. Watched him go until he disappeared into the gray haze, a small figure swallowed by the ruins of a dead city. The walk took most of the day, moved carefully, staying off the main roads and avoiding populated areas. The closer he got to the Citadel, the more patrols he encountered. He hid in rubble, in abandoned buildings, in sewage tunnels, waiting for them to pass. As the sun began to set, he reached the outer perimeter. The Citadel loomed above him, impossibly large, blocking out the stars as they appeared in the darkening sky. Warning signs in a dozen languages marked the boundaries. Automated turrets tracked back and forth, searching for targets. Found a sheltered spot and settled in to wait. According to his information, the guards would change shifts at midnight. There would be a 30-second window when the patrol patterns overlapped and created a blind spot near the eastern maintenance entrance. 30 seconds to begin the impossible. He ate a small meal of dried rations and drank some water. Then he closed his eyes and let his mind go quiet. He thought about his parents, his sister, the life he had lost. He thought about and everything she had taught him. He thought about and the pendant hanging around his neck. When he opened his eyes, all emotion was gone. There was only the mission now, only the target, only the cold, patient hunter waiting for his moment to strike. Midnight came. The guards began their rotation and moved like a shadow through the darkness toward the walls of. The first guard died without making a sound. Moved through the darkness like smoke, his feet barely touching the ground. The sentry stood at its post near the eastern maintenance entrance, compound eyes scanning the perimeter. It was 7 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor that could stop plasma rounds. Its claws could tear through steel. It had been trained since birth to be a perfect killing machine. It never saw the human boy drop from the wall above. Landed on the creature's shoulders, his weight driving it forward and off balance. In the same motion, his monomolecular wire wrapped around the soft tissue between its neck plates. The wire was thinner than a human hair and sharper than any blade. It sliced through the alien's throat before the guard could even process what was happening. The body collapsed, caught it and lowered it silently to the ground, tucking it into the shadows near the wall. The entire attack had taken less than 3 seconds. 1 down, 11 more between him and the maintenance entrance. According to this information, the outer perimeter was guarded by Scout-class warriors, the lowest rank in the military hierarchy. They were still dangerous by human standards, but they were also predictable. They followed their patrol routes exactly, never deviating. They checked in at regular intervals. They believed completely in the security of the Citadel. That belief was about to cost them their lives. Moved to his next target. This guard was walking a patrol route along the eastern wall, sweeping a sensor wand back and forth across the ground. The device would detect any metal, any explosives, any electronic signatures. It wouldn't detect a human carrying nothing but ceramic blades and synthetic fiber. Waited in the shadow of a support column. He had studied vision extensively. Their compound eyes could see across multiple light spectrums, detecting heat signatures and movement that human eyes would miss entirely. But those same eyes had a critical weakness, a blind spot directly above their heads, a remnant of their evolution as ground-dwelling predators. The guard walked past, pressed himself against the column, barely breathing. The alien sensor wand swept within inches of his hiding spot. The guard paused, tilting its head slightly as if sensing something wrong. Then it continued walking. Strug. He launched himself from the shadows, vaulting over the guard's head through its blind spot. Before the creature could react, his ceramic blade was driving upward through the soft tissue beneath its mandibles, piercing directly into its brain. The guard spasmed once, twice, then went still. Two down. The next 30 minutes were a masterwork of silent death. Moved through the outer perimeter like a ghost, taking down guards one by one with surgical precision. He used every technique had taught him, exploiting every weakness she had identified. Some guards he killed from above, dropping onto them before they could raise an alarm. Others he took from behind, his wire slicing through their defenses before they knew he was there. Each kill was clean, efficient, emotionless. Didn't hate these guards personally. He didn't know their names, their histories, whether they had families waiting for them somewhere. He killed them because they stood between him and his target. Nothing more, nothing less. The 11th guard almost ruined everything. Was approaching the maintenance entrance when the creature stepped around a corner unexpectedly. Its patrol route should have taken it in the opposite direction, but something had changed. Maybe a supervisor's order, maybe simple random chance. Whatever the reason, suddenly found himself face to face with an armed warrior at a distance of less than 3 meters. Time seemed to slow down. The guard's compound eyes widened in shock. Its hand moved toward the communication device on its belt. Its mouth opened to raise an alarm that would bring every soldier in the Citadel down on its position. Moved faster. His throwing blade left his hand before the guard's fingers touched its communicator. The ceramic knife spun through the air and embedded itself in the creature's throat, severing the nerve cluster that controlled its vocal cords. The guard made a horrible wet gurgling sound but couldn't form words, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything except stare in disbelief as a human child crossed the distance between them and finished the job with a second blade to the brain stem. The body hit the ground with a heavy thud, froze, listening for any response, footsteps approaching, alarm signals activating, weapons powering up. Nothing. The night remained quiet. He let out a slow breath and retrieved his blades. That had been close, too close. He couldn't afford to make mistakes like that inside the Citadel. The 12th guard was standing directly in front of the maintenance entrance, positioned beneath a security light that illuminated the entire area. There was no way to approach it unseen, no blind spots to exploit. This one would require a different approach. Studied the situation for several minutes. The light was mounted on an automated system that swept back and forth across the entrance every 30 seconds. The guard stood at attention, unmoving, its compound eyes fixed forward. Behind it, the entrance door was sealed with an electronic lock that required a specific code to open. He had the code. This information included security protocols for every entrance in the Citadel. The problem was getting close enough to use it. Then noticed something. Every time the security light swept to the far left of its arc, it created a small shadow behind a ventilation unit about 10 meters from the guard's position. The shadow lasted only about 4 seconds before the light swept back. 4 seconds wasn't enough time to cross 10 meters, kill the guard, and reach the door, but it was enough time to get into position. Waited for the light to swing away, then sprinted to the ventilation unit and pressed himself into the shadow. The light swept back. He held his breath. The guard didn't move. It hadn't seen him. Now he was only 10 meters away, hidden in a shadow that would last 4 seconds every half minute. He needed to time his attack perfectly. The light swept left again, exploded out of hiding. He covered the distance in less than 2 seconds, moving in absolute silence. The guard began to turn, its compound eyes registering movement in its peripheral vision. Too slow. Its wire was already around its neck, cutting deep before the creature could raise its weapon. The guard fell, caught the body and lowered it quietly, then turned to the door. He punched in the security code from memory. The lock clicked. The door slid open. He stepped inside the Citadel of. The maintenance corridor was dark and narrow, designed for service robots rather than the massive warriors. Pipes ran along the ceiling, carrying coolant and power to the systems throughout the structure. The walls hummed with energy. Paused to let his eyes adjust to the darkness. According to his mental map, this corridor connected to a network of ventilation shafts that ran through the entire Citadel. He needed to find access point 7, which would take him up to the residential levels. He moved forward, staying low, listening for any sounds of movement. The Citadel was supposed to be quiet at this hour. Most guards were stationed at fixed posts, and the night shift was minimal. But the aliens were not the only danger. Motion sensors lined the walls. Pressure plates monitored the floors. One wrong step could trigger an alarm that would bring the entire security force down on his head. Navigated through the traps with practiced ease. He stepped over sensor beams, ducked under cameras, avoided pressure plates by clinging to the pipes along the ceiling. It was exhausting work that required absolute concentration. One mistake would mean death. 40 minutes later, he reached access point 7. The ventilation shaft was barely large enough for his body. He would have to crawl on his stomach for most of the way, but it would take him exactly where he needed to go. He looked back the way he had come. Somewhere behind him, 12 bodies lay cooling in the darkness, the first of many. Climbed into the shaft and began his ascent into the heart of the enemy. The inside of the Citadel was designed to make visitors feel small. Emerged from the ventilation shaft into a massive corridor lined with black stone pillars that stretched up into darkness. The ceiling was so high that he couldn't see it. Strange alien lights flickered along the walls, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air was cold and smelled of metal, and something else, something organic and unpleasant that reminded of old blood. They had built this place to intimidate. Every surface, every angle, every detail was meant to remind conquered species of their insignificance. Giant statues of warriors lined the hallways, their stone eyes seeming to follow anyone who passed. Inscriptions in the alien language covered the walls, celebrating 10,000 years of conquest. Ignored all of it, he had a mission to complete. According to his mental map, he was on level 23 of the Citadel, the administrative section where lower-ranking officers managed the daily operations of the occupation. The High Commander's quarters were on level 89, near the top of the structure. Between here and there were 66 levels of guards, security systems, and obstacles that had never been overcome by any human. He began to move. The key to surviving inside the Citadel was patience. Didn't rush. He moved from shadow to shadow, corridor to corridor, always staying ahead of the patrol patterns. When guards approached, he hid in alcoves or pressed himself against walls, using the same techniques that had served him in the outer perimeter. The guards inside the Citadel were different from the ones outside. These were warrior-class soldiers, bigger, faster, better equipped. Their armor was thicker. Their weapons were more powerful. They moved in coordinated squads rather than individual patrols. But they were also more confident, more careless. They believed absolutely in the security of their fortress. They never expected to find an enemy inside their walls. On level 31, encountered his first real problem. He was crawling through a ventilation duct when he heard voices below him. Peering through a grate, he saw a group of 5 guards gathered in a junction room. They were not patrolling. They were stationed there permanently, watching the only corridor that led to the upper levels. There was no way around them. The ventilation system in this section had been sealed off after a minor malfunction 3 years ago. Intelligence hadn't been updated to reflect this change. Would have to go through the junction room. 5 guards, no way to pick them off one by one, no shadows to hide in, no blind spots to exploit. Thought carefully. He had trained for situations like this, outnumbered, with no good options. Had taught him that when direct approaches failed, indirect ones sometimes worked. He studied the room through the grate. The guards were relaxed, talking amongst themselves in their clicking language. Their weapons were holstered. They weren't expecting trouble. On the far side of the room, noticed a control panel connected to the lighting system. If he could disable the lights, he would have about 5 seconds of darkness before the backup systems activated. 5 seconds wasn't much, but in complete darkness, his training would give him an advantage. He crawled back through the duct until he found an access point to the electrical systems. Using the tools in his pack, he created a short circuit that would kill power to the junction room for exactly 6 seconds. Then he returned to the grate above the guards and waited. The lights went out, dropped from the ceiling before the guards even realized what was happening. In the darkness, he was a shadow among shadows, but his eyes had been adjusted to the dark for hours, and he could see the faint heat signatures of the bodies around him. The first guard died with a blade through its eye socket, used the falling body to shield himself from the second guard's wild swing, then rolled under its arm and drove his knife into its knee joint. As the creature collapsed, he was already moving to the third target. 3 seconds, 2 guards down. The remaining guards were panicking, firing their weapons blindly into the darkness. Plasma bolts scorched the walls and floor, moved between them like water through rocks, using their confusion against them. The fourth guard died trying to activate its communication device. The fifth managed to get one good look at the human boy before a monomolecular wire removed its head from its body. 5 seconds, 5 guards, no alarm. The lights came back on, stood in the center of the junction room, surrounded by corpses. He was breathing hard, his heart pounding in his chest. That had been the most dangerous 30 seconds of his life. He took a moment to collect himself, then dragged the bodies into a storage closet and continued upward. The hours passed slowly. Level 40, level 50, level 60. Each level brought new challenges, new guards, new systems to bypass. Killed when he had to and avoided when he could. His body accumulated small injuries, cuts, bruises, strained muscles. His mind stayed sharp, focused, utterly committed to the mission. On level 71, he made a mistake. He was crossing a bridge between 2 sections of the Citadel when a guard spotted him. The creature was too far away to kill quietly, and it triggered its communicator before it could react. Security breach, level 71, human intruder. The alarm spread through the Citadel like fire. Sirens began to wail. Doors sealed automatically. Guards poured into the corridors, their weapons hot and ready. Ran. He sprinted through hallways he had memorized from maps, taking turns that the guards couldn't predict. Behind him, he could hear heavy footsteps and shouting voices. Plasma bolts flashed past his head, scorching the walls. The entire Citadel was now hunting him. He ducked into a maintenance shaft and crawled through pipes that were barely wide enough for his body. The guards couldn't follow, they were too big, but they knew where the shaft led, and they would be waiting for him when he emerged. Didn't emerge where they expected. Instead, he used a cutting tool to create a new exit, dropping into an empty storage room 3 levels above where the guards had gathered. By the time they realized their mistake, he was already gone, climbing through the infrastructure of the Citadel like a rat in the walls. Lieutenant found him first. Was one of the elite, a decorated veteran who had personally killed hundreds of humans during the pacification. He was faster than the other guards, smarter, more experienced. He tracked through the upper levels with the patience of a natural predator. They met in a loading bay on level 77, had anticipated its route and positioned himself to intercept. When the human boy dropped from an overhead beam, the alien was waiting. So said his translator, rendering his words into smooth, cold syllables. "You're the one causing all this trouble. One human child." Didn't respond. He was assessing the situation, exits blocked, no cover available, enemy directly between him and the only route upward. Bad odds. Tilted his massive head. "I have to admit I'm impressed. No human has ever penetrated this deep into the Citadel. Your species usually gives up so easily, screams and begs and dies. Are you going to talk me to death? Asked calmly. Or are we going to do this? Laughed, a harsh clicking sound that echoed off the metal walls. I like you, little human. I'm going to enjoy taking you apart. He attacked without warning, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. His claws slashed through the air where his head had been a fraction of a second before, rolled under the strike and came up running, putting distance between them. Was stronger, faster, longer reach. In a straight fight would lose, so he didn't fight straight. He led through the loading bay, using cargo containers and machinery to break line of sight. Every time the alien lunged at him, he wasn't there. Every time committed to an attack, exploited the opening. Small cuts appeared on the alien's arms, his legs, his torso. None of them were serious, but they accumulated. Stand still and fight, roared in frustration. Why would I do that? Replied, dodging another slash. The fight lasted 9 minutes, an eternity in combat time. Grew increasingly angry, his attacks becoming wilder and less controlled. Stayed calm, patient, waiting for the moment he knew would come. It came when overextended on a killing blow. For just a second, his weight was forward, his balance compromised. Moved inside his guard and drove both ceramic blades into the nerve cluster at the base of his skull. Fell to his knees, his eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible, he whispered. You're just a child. I'm humanity, said quietly, and we don't die easy. He twisted the blades, and his eyes went dark. Retrieved the access codes from the lieutenant's body. Level 89 was just 12 floors above him. The High Commander was waiting. He left his corpse where it fell and continued upward through the halls of High Commander had ruled the eastern sector for 200 years. He sat in his throne room at the top of the Citadel, surrounded by 20 of the finest warriors the Empire had ever produced. These were not ordinary guards. They were the commander's personal unit, chosen from the best soldiers across a dozen conquered worlds. Each one had killed more enemies than most armies. Together, they had never lost a battle. Himself was ancient by standards. 300 years of life had made him huge, his body covered in thick armor plates that had darkened with age. His compound eyes had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. His claws had ended the lives of kings, generals, and the last defenders of 100 conquered species. He had never known fear. He barely remembered what it felt like. The reports from the lower levels disturbed him, though he wouldn't admit it. A human intruder had somehow penetrated deep into the Citadel, killing guards and evading entire security teams. Lieutenant, one of his best officers, had been found dead on level 77 with his own access code stolen. One human, just one, causing all this chaos. Seal all entrances to the throne room, ordered. His voice was deep and rumbling like stones grinding together. Double the guards at every checkpoint. I want this vermin found and brought to me alive. Yes, Commander, his captain responded. The guards took their positions, weapons ready, eyes watching every shadow. The lights flickered. Sat up on his throne. What was that? Unknown, Commander. The power systems show no. The lights went out completely. For 3 seconds, the throne room was plunged into absolute darkness. The guards activated their thermal vision, scanning for threats. They saw nothing. The room was empty except for themselves. Then the lights came back on, and everything changed. The 2 guards at the main entrance were dead. Their bodies lay in spreading pools of blood, throats cut so cleanly that they hadn't even had time to fall. Standing between them was a human boy, young, thin, covered in the blood of dozens of warriors. His dark eyes were fixed on the throne at the far end of the room. For a long moment, no one moved. The guards stared at the small figure in disbelief. This was the creature that had penetrated the most heavily defended structure in the sector. This child then began to laugh. It started as a low rumble and built into a roaring sound that shook the walls. The guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react. Their commander was laughing at a situation that had just cost them two of their brothers. "Look at this," said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "One little human walking into my throne room. Did you come here to die, child? Did you think you could challenge the might of the Empire?" Didn't respond. His eyes moved slowly across the room, counting guards, nodding positions, calculating angles. 18 warriors left, all heavily armed, all watching him. "I know who you are," continued. "You're from the eastern colonies, the ones I cleansed 3 years ago. Your kind was multiplying too quickly, spreading too far. We had to be thorough." "Do you remember them?" asked. His voice was quiet but carried clearly across the silent room. "The people you killed, do you remember their faces?" Waved a dismissive claw. "Does the farmer remember individual weeds? Your species is a plague, human. I removed it. That is all." "My family wasn't a weed." Took a step forward. The guards raised their weapons but gestured for them to hold. "My mother, my father, my little sister, she was 8 years old. She liked to draw pictures of flowers." "Touching," said sarcastically. "And you've come all this way to avenge them. One child against my entire command. Your kind truly is as stupid as we believed." Smiled. It was a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I didn't come here to challenge your empire, Commander. I came here for you, just you." "Then you failed. Kill him." The guards attacked. What happened next would become legend among both humans and for generations to come. Later, when the security recordings were analyzed, military experts would watch in disbelief, playing the footage over and over, trying to understand how it was possible. Moved. He didn't fight like a soldier or a warrior. He fought like water flowing downhill, like wind through leaves, like something that existed in the spaces between moments. The guards were faster than him, stronger than him, better equipped than him, and none of it mattered. He used their own bodies against them, positioning himself so their attacks hit each other instead of him. He exploited their formation, slipping through gaps that shouldn't have existed. He targeted the weak points in their armor with surgical precision: joints, throat tissue, the soft spots beneath mandibles. The first 3 guards died before the rest understood what was happening. The next 4 died trying to coordinate a response. The following 5 died in a chaotic melee where they were as much a danger to each other as to their target. Took wounds, a slash across his ribs, a burn on his shoulder, a cut above his eye that sent blood streaming down his face. He ignored the pain. Pain was just information. It told him he was still alive. The last 6 guards fell in rapid succession. Moved among them like a ghost, his blades finding throats and nerve clusters with mechanical efficiency. The throne room echoed with the sounds of combat, plasma fire, the clash of weapons, the wet thud of bodies hitting the floor. Then it was quiet. Stood in the center of the room, breathing hard. 20 of the finest warriors lay dead around him. His body screamed with exhaustion and injury. Blood dripped from his wounds onto the polished floor. At the far end of the room, High Commander rose slowly from his throne. "Impressive," the ancient alien said. There was something new in his voice now, not fear exactly, but a recognition he had not felt in centuries. Respect for an enemy. "I have lived 300 years and never seen anything like that. Your species produces remarkable killers." "We had good teachers," replied. "Your empire taught us what happens when we don't fight back." Stepped down from his throne. He was massive, nearly 9 feet tall, with armor plates that had withstood direct hits from military weapons. His claws were longer than his forearms. "You've done well to get this far," said, advancing slowly. "But this is where it ends. I've killed thousands of warriors in personal combat, champions from every conquered species. You're wounded, exhausted, armed with nothing but kitchen knives. There is no victory for you here. Shifted his stance, adjusting his grip on his remaining blade. Maybe not, but there's no victory for you either. Not anymore. They came together in the center of the room. Was everything expected? Fast despite his size, powerful beyond imagination, experienced in ways that made Lieutenant look like a novice. His attacks were precise and devastating, each strike meant to kill instantly. Survived through pure instinct and 3 years of training. He dodged, weaved, deflected, and refused to die. Every time thought he had the human cornered, slipped away. Every time the commander committed to a killing blow, made him pay with another small cut. The fight went on for minutes that felt like hours. Both combatants bled from dozens of wounds. His vision was starting to blur from blood loss. His movements were slowing. He knew he couldn't last much longer. So he stopped trying to survive. He started trying to win. Lunged forward with a strike meant to tear in half. Instead of dodging, stepped into the attack. The commander's claw raked across his side, opening a wound that would kill him if he didn't get medical attention soon. But the move put inside's guard, too close for the alien's long arms to defend. Drove his blade upward with everything he had left. The ceramic knife punched through the ancient armor at its throat, penetrating the thick plates that had protected the commander for centuries. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was enough. Staggered backward, ichor streaming from the wound. His eyes were wide with something that might have been shock, might have been disbelief, might have been the fear he had forgotten so long ago. How he gasped. Followed him step by step, not letting him recover. You wanted to know why I came here. I didn't come to die. I didn't come for vengeance. I came to send a message. He struck again, his blade finding another gap in the ancient armor. Fell to one knee. Your empire has conquered 1,000 species. You've destroyed worlds. You think you're gods. Another strike. Collapsed onto his back, his great body finally failing him. But you forgot something. You forgot that the small things, the weak things, the things you dismiss as vermin, they remember, they learn, and they fight back. Stood over the fallen commander. Behind him, the door to the throne room was beginning to buckle as reinforcements tried to break through. He had minutes at most. My sister liked to draw flowers, said quietly. She had this picture she made of our family, stick figures with big smiles. She was so proud of it. Tried to speak, but only blood came out. I want you to think about her in your last moments. I want you to know that an 8-year-old girl's memory is what killed you. A little girl you probably never even saw. Raised his blade one final time. We remember everything. The blade fell. 3 hours later, when reinforcements finally cut through the sealed doors, they found the throne room in ruins. 21 of their finest warriors dead, including the High Commander himself. His body had been arranged carefully in the center of the chamber, his rank insignia removed, his ceremonial weapons missing. Carved into the ancient armor over his chest, in perfect script, were 3 words: "We remember everything." The human intruder was never found. Some believed he died escaping the Citadel. Others claimed to have seen him walking calmly through the chaos of the alarm, disappearing into the ruins of Seoul like a ghost returning to its grave. A week later, received a package at the Resistance headquarters. Inside was rank insignia, his ceremonial blade, and a small metal pendant with a Korean character engraved on it, the symbol for home. Attached was a handwritten note. One down, tell the others to prepare. The war isn't over, it's just beginning. It was signed with a single name. The story spread across the occupied territories like wildfire, whispered in refugee camps, transmitted through resistance networks, even muttered fearfully among soldiers stationed on human worlds. A young human had walked into the most heavily defended fortress in the sector, alone, and killed its commander. The Empire began to realize something they had never considered before. They had conquered humanity easily, too easily. They had dismissed humans as weak, primitive, insignificant. They had never bothered to learn what humans could become when they had nothing left to lose. Now they would learn. Somewhere in the ashes of the eastern colonies, a 17-year-old boy with fire in his eyes was already planning his next target. He carried the memories of his family, the teachings of his mentor, and the pendant of a resistance leader who had believed in him when no one else did. The young human had entered the Citadel alone. The guards didn't live to report it. And humanity would never surrender again.